spread culture and spread the love of God and things like that, then it should be evident in how they react, how they behave, and it should be a visible concept. And the hard thing is that a lot of parents unintentionally will abdicate this responsibility. So parents are supposed to teach their kids how to love and honor God, and they're supposed to discipline in ways that are God honoring. And guys, sometimes this doesn't happen. Uh, you have some parents who aren't present in the home, and then you have some parents who do not want to talk about uncomfortable topics, and so they will outsource uh, their responsibility to teach their kids to another institution. And so, one of the things that I see probably the most frequently whenever it comes to this outsource of discipleship is whenever it comes to sex education. Not very many parents will have discussions, ongoing discussions from the times kids are little, as far as their sex and sexuality. And so they'll just say, okay, well, the church can take care of that. And, the church does not get a lot of time with kids whenever you look at the scope of, how much time do kids spend in church versus how much time do kids spend interacting one-on-one with a youth pastor versus a teacher or, or with a parent. And so the parents get most of that intimate time. And so that should not be outsourced, even whenever it comes to things like education. And, whenever you look at parents and their responsibility and they're not present in the home, you have some kids for example, during this epidemic that we have going on, they may not see their parents very often. They may be left alone all the time. Or you may have some kids who being at home is not a good thing. All right. And that can be for a variety of reasons. If parents are supposed to discipline and nurture their kids, maybe whenever they go home now, one of the things that they're, a lot of, at least that's very big right now, is family life. And sometimes your home life is not a safe place. And the parents are not, are abdicating their responsibility to nurture their child, to take care of them. And so this is a huge issue that we have even in today's culture. Another one are the arts. This institution is built into God's very design. And so this includes literature, movies, art, music, anything, dance. And there are a lot of different ways that you can see these norms being violated. So let's keep going. All right, so God designed the world in a certain way to reflect his truth, goodness, and beauty. God is the ultimate artist, guys. Next time you get the opportunity to look at a sunrise or sunset, literally just take it in. I mean, it's absolutely breathtaking. And every human being has the potential for fallenness of the medium of communication. So basically, guys, we're created in God's image. And so whenever it comes to this idea of art, even that is going to be impacted. All right, even that is going to be twisted or used for wrong purposes. So whenever it comes to identifying violations of truth and goodness and beauty, we have got to have an understanding of the objective guidelines that Scripture gives us in order to be accurate in understanding all of the different realities and as far as artistic mediums. So one of the things that I hear a lot whenever it comes to the arts is huge conversations on music. You have too much drums, that's bad, that's worldly. But there's no scriptural foundation for it. And so we have got to search Scripture, because that's still big in the church, guys. And and a lot of times we can snub it and just be like, oh, well, that's just because, that's your generation and this is this generation. But seriously, guys, theologically, why are they wrong? Or why are they right? And that's something those are good questions to ask, because it is our job as Christians to be able to sift out those things that we should accept as Christians as God created and good, versus those things that are part of culture that we should discern as bad and reject. All right, education is also damaged by the fall. So here's the thing is the more you come to know, the more humbled you should become about what you do not know. All right. So I know you guys absolutely love it whenever people find out that you go to a Christian school and they automatically assume that you know everything that there is to know about the Bible. Well, we know that that's not true. You can spend a lifetime learning about Scripture, and you will always be humbled because you will never know everything because He's a supernatural God, right? Now, in our Western academia, we see the fallenness of education because they try to take God out of the equation. He is not relevant. He is a separate entity. And so it goes back to that divided house, that dualism, where they are trying to take God, just like they try to take God out of politics. The same as with education. And we know that education is not something that is neutral, that if God created everything, whenever it comes to education, He's obviously going to be a part of everything. Because anything that we learn, any form of truth is going to automatically always point back to God. Okay, so let's do a little bit of recap. So, culture results from the collective efforts of thoroughly fallen human. I think we've established that. Because of common grace, and in the next chapter we'll be talking about this concept and idea of common grace. Because of it and the Christian influence, some cultures are more in line with God's design. But no culture is ever totally neutral or totally good. And so here's the thing is that as much as sin is considered abnormal as far as how God originally designed creation, darkness has become the new norm, not by God, but by human standards. And so the light of God's grace is needed to shine in the midst of it. So believers, us who claim Christ, are sojourners, all right? So we are just travelers. And our lives are supposed to run contrary to the norms of surrounding culture. And, a more modern phrase is this idea of being countercultural. And so not that you completely reject all of culture, because remember, we're sojourners. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. And so that requires our discernment, wisdom and discernment, and looking at all of those areas of culture that we should accept and that we should reject. So this type of mentality as far as how in the world do we balance culture and what do we discern as far as what do we reject and what do we accept. We tend to have two very different extremes that are tempting to fall in line with. The first is isolation. And so the Bible does call for distinctiveness within a fallen culture. I just stated that as far as we're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. However, we're supposed to be in the world. So we're not supposed to be completely isolated from it. People who take this to the extreme and isolate themselves tend to compartmentalize fallenness into certain sectors of society. So basically, like, oh, well, movie theaters are evil or whatever. This is evil. And so they will flat out reject one area of society. And this discounts the pervasiveness of the fall and leads to blind spots. So then what you get is only certain segments of society then are critiqued and condemned while others are able to get a free pass, like, oh, that's okay. The other form is imitation. So where, all right, if you're not isolated, well, we're just, a common form of this in the church would have been, oh, we're just being seeker friendly. And so what you see is the church and they're in the world, but you can't tell that they're not of the world because they end up imitating more of culture than necessarily discerning what's good and rejecting those bad aspects of it. And so scripture does call for holiness, period. And so we are not supposed to imitate our culture. Imitators will usually, what they'll do is they'll minimize or deny expressions of fallenness. And so that can be incredibly prominent. And so, probably where I've seen this, the biggest issue is language, language as far as, what's coming out of your mouth or not. And then, and then another, two other hot topics are sex and drunkenness. Those are a lot of the things that the church really tends to struggle with as far as, all right, well, what's permissible, what's not permissible, what's part of culture, what's not part of culture, what should we accept, what should we reject. And here's the thing is that Christians can't compartmentalize or conform. Either way, it comes down to whether it's permissible or not, is does it compromise your growth with Christ, or would it compromise somebody else's? If it ruins your testimony, is it worth it? Here's the thing is that we have to maintain holiness and display Christ's love in the midst of darkness. And so if you look like the world, then that's not good. That's not good. You want to be distinct. You want to be the salt and light of the earth. All right, so let's do a quick review of chapter 7. So some big concepts that we learned is that the world in the Bible is the totality. Whenever we talk about the word world, you want to know this. It is the totality of unredeemed life dominated by sin outside of Christ. And the world is, when we talk about that word, is the bad part of culture. Not all of culture, just the bad part. And last, we see that God's grace and mercy shows in his determination not to let the world crumble. And where do we see that? We see that in his redemptive plan.